Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pay. Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down and strap in. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pain. This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. If you had all the time in the world, what would you do with it? Would you read, educate yourself, find a new vocation, exercise, or waste away with some much-needed rest? We move in this life so fast that we often have little or no time to sit and think. We reorganize the path and the direction that our life is taking to pump the brakes on our busy lives. Suddenly, an event happens that forces us to look at our lives from an elevated position on the battlefield. When that time comes, it's frequently too late to change the past. Here is your moment to shine, or live with regret. The smart ones choose to change the trajectory and move forward using their past to reshape their future. And welcome back to another episode of the Suffering Podcast. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace. And on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we sit down with Seth Ferranti to discuss the suffering of an ex-con filmmaker, because that's pretty much what you are. Seth, thank you so much for joining us, coming all this way from California. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's like an odd mixture, you know, ex-con filmmaker.
Ex-con filmmaker. Well, you get to redefine your terms, I guess, as you get older.
Yeah, you know, I am ex-con and filmmaker, but I kind of been trying to brand myself like the outlaw filmmaker. You know, like my company's called Outlaw Films.
Right.
You know, my parent company's called like Guerrilla Convict. That's from the publishing house I formed while I was in. But yeah, I don't know. I just see it like you got so many people in the film industry that they want to come to crime, you know, either from the cop side or the criminal side. And if any of us can even get involved as like a consultant, you know, like we're lucky.
Well, that's why, because you have a certain perspective, and I want to get into this later on in the show, because you have a perspective on, say, a crime show that these producers, they're not going to know, because we see it from a police standpoint, where when you make a police movie, Mike and I will watch that police movie within 2 seconds, say, you're full of shit, you didn't do your research. All right. Before we get into anything, let's get into this week's social media question, but I do want to thank Toyota of Hackensack. Listen, Toyota Hackensack always treats us very well. I buy my cars there. And if you're looking for a car, let them help you find a car. They're always honest. They're upfront. As cops, we don't trust anybody, but I do trust the people at Toyota of Hackensack. Go to toyotahackensack.com and they'll help you out. So this week's social media question comes from Ken. Every week we take some, and some of them are, I'm going to tell you right now, some of them are out there. But this one's actually pretty good. It says, Ken writes, what have you always hoped you've done in your life? So you're our guest today, Seth. What's one thing that you've always hoped that you've done? Maybe you didn't get a chance to do it yet.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing, and I think I kind of live my life like this, is I just try to, you know, complete what I set out to do, you know. So
finish the task.
Yeah, so I mean, and this is ongoing, you know. It started with like articles, books, now films. So I'm just trying, you know, it's like a continual thing. I like to make stuff. I like to create stuff. So, you know, once I take a project on or I decide to do something, I just want to finish it, you know. So it's kind of like keeping my word, you know, to people, but also keeping my word to myself.
I like that answer. I like that answer a lot. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I mean, growing up, I never really hoped to do a podcast with you, but here I am stuck doing it. I always hoped to be a football player, but then I realized I was too short and too slow.
Usually got to be about 5'2" to play football.
See, now it's fucked up. One thing I really wanted to do in my life, I want to like jump out of an airplane.
I did it. It's pretty damn cool.
That's like a bucket list thing of mine. But at 56, you know, my bones are a little brittle and I don't.
So you'll go tandem. So the first time you jump, you'll go tandem.
I don't want a guy strapped to my back like that, though.
You will get power fucked into the ground if that parachute doesn't open.
Oh, yeah, without doubt. Yeah.
And usually the guys that strapped to the back of you smell so bad. They
And now,
always do.
If they come out with some like hot looking women that will hang on my back, then maybe I'll do it.
For me, it's real simple. I have zero. I always consider myself very creative, but I have zero musical ability. I always wanted to learn how to play the piano. So years ago, I can type very fast. My grandmother was a government secretary on a manual typewriter. She used to do over 200 words a minute. So I learned from her, and I can type very fast. So I figured, hey, I can type. I can learn to play the piano. There was never a more untrue statement than that, because the piano and the typewriter are exact opposites. So and it's not too late, I can do it now. And everybody says that it gets a little easier as you get older, but I always wanted to learn how to play the piano or guitar or some musical instrument because I do love music. It's real simple. Ken, thank you so much for sending that question in. Keep sending them in. We'll try to get them on the air.
Listen, if you get in a band, I am not coming to see you. I could just picture you on stage, that big fat body bouncing all around, trying to play a fucking guitar.
See, he's all pissed off today. He didn't have his Cheerios this morning or something. Seth, I've done a lot of reading about you, and the reason I picked out ex-con filmmakers because I think I read a website, right? That's how they characterize you. But I want you to give our audience a little bit of window into who you are, where you grew up.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in California. I was born in Lemoore. It's actually between San Diego, LA, out in the desert. They call it the Central Coast. I was actually born on a military base out there. That's where they train like the fighter pilots, out in the desert. So if they crash,
it's like Top Gun, right?
Yeah. So and then, but my dad was in the military, so we kind of bounced around. I was a military brat, but like we were San Diego, but I also lived in Germany. I lived in England. I lived Virginia Beach, Rhode Island, Monterey, San Jose.
Now, that was at like a young age where you bounced around all that young?
Yeah. Basically every 2 years,
That'd be tough, like making friends, and then all of a sudden it's just like, see you later.
Yeah, it's weird because I think everything that I do, because I got like, as a creative person, I got like this big thing for recognition. Like I'm always craving recognition. That's why like I make shit and put it out to the world. And I think it all stems, I'm 51 now, so I've thought about it a lot. And I think it stems from that, moving around every 2 years. And, as soon as I get a group of friends and people knew who I am, it's like we would move again. So
you have to create your whole new world.
Reestablish yourself again.
Yeah. So as a young man or as a kid, and even a teenager, it was, it led to a lot of insecurity, on the inside, nothing outwardly that people could see. But, yeah, I've done a lot of, recollecting and kind of introspection. And I think that's kind of like, that's my whole thing. I want people to know who I am. So like I try to create these, grand work of arts, they're going to have an impact. And so everybody's going to know my name. So,
well, it's better to know your name for your works of art instead of your former life.
Well, there's got to be a good part about that. You hook up with a girl and it's like a hit and run, You hook up with her, she starts getting serious, and all of a sudden you say, gotta go.
So growing up in California, and being in California now, you in California have the most interesting street signs. I don't know whether they're still up there. I know they were up there in 2000 when I was out in San Diego, the 3 people crossing the road. Are they still up?
Man, I don't even know.
So when I was in San Diego, you're driving down, was that 5?
Yeah.
Going north-south? They had street signs when you got closer to the Mexican border. 3 people in like a running, it's like a school crossing sign, but 3 people running. So I asked somebody, I go, what's the sign? He goes, because people are coming over the border and they're running across Route 5 and they're getting whacked. I said, it was the strangest street sign I ever seen in my life. But yeah, California is like a whole different world. How do you like living out there?
Oh no, I love California because I'm I love the mountains. So I'm like, I love to ski. I just love to be in the mountains. So, but I also love the beach. So California is pretty much the only place you can be where you can go from the mountains and 3 hours and you're at the beach. So
I was gonna say you could like lay on the beach all day and go skiing at night in California.
Yeah, it's incredible. And even like where I live now, I live in Chico, and it's kind of like the valley. It's like farming community. It's between the Sierra Nevadas and it's between the coastal mountains. And it's just the weather, man. Like I just go out. Like I can go sit in my backyard. It's like 75 degrees.
Well, that was San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego's like that too.
Fantastic weather.
I'd never seen anything like it. I don't think I slept more than 3 hours the whole 3 weeks I was out there because I just didn't want to miss anything. And listen, San Diego, I had a hotel room. I was right at the bridge of Coronado. I couldn't ask for a better thing. But California, it's an odd place, and everybody classifies California by L.A. Like that's what, and now San Francisco. So California does get a bad rap because
I know you've been to San Francisco. I'm staying away
And
from
LA
that.
and LA is a clusterfuck. I don't. I got to go to LA a lot. Because I got a lot of friends in the industry there. So I'm there. At least once every 2 months. But it's just the traffic, man. I cannot stand it. There's so many people there, man. It's crazy.
well, now it's got the bad homeless situation there, and it's sort of the city's got to do something because it's got to
I've
implode.
seen pictures of Muscle Beach and all the
Yeah, it's
Venice
bad.
Beach and all that. It's like a homeless heaven now.
When I went out there, that's the place I had to go. I
Yeah,
had
they
to go
got all the
see
crazy
Must
people out there too. Actually, I love Venice Beach, man, because it's kind of it's beautiful. It's California, but at the same time, it has like that real seedy element, and like you never know what's gonna happen. But like I say, some people don't like to. I like to go. I like to go there and walk around, but I'm not scared that anybody's gonna do anything to me. So
But the vast majority of California is, like you said, mountains, deserts, beauty, beaches. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful out there. It just gets a little.
and it's so big, man. It's like, dude, like I live in Chico, so Chico's basically between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe, right? And I'm like 2.5 hours to Tahoe, 2.5 hours to Frisco, right? Maybe about, I don't know, 8 hours from LA. But then like you can go like you go all the way up north, like into the Emerald Triangle. That's like 5 hours, and it just goes. It's like straight mountains on the coast. It just goes, for like hours and hours before you get to Oregon. So, and then that's not even talking about like you go to LA. It's like another couple hours down to San Diego. So the state is just so big. It's like it's really almost like its own country.
Yeah, well, that's why it's got so much pull in the whole world because of its size. So you grew up in these military bases, and your father was I'm assuming your father was military.
Yeah.
What was he?
No, he was a Marine.
He was a Marine.
Yeah.
Okay, so you somehow get involved in this life of crime. I don't. I've grown up with military kids before, and they do usually go one way or the other. They either ultra strict or they just take that other road. How did you?
We see that in law enforcement too. Most of the bad kids out there are cops' kids.
Yeah, oh, for parties.
Oh, yeah.
The best parties
Without doubt.
were at cops'
And
kids.
fireworks, too.
Yeah, because we confiscated them from
Confiscate the fireworks and give them to the kids.
So how did you go down this other path?
Yeah, I think I was just it's from the whole thing like moving around, right? I kind of figured out like when I was 13, I wanted people to know who I am. I wanted that acceptance. Like I craved that recognition, so like when I was 13 and I kind of started experimenting with marijuana, I started experimenting with like psychedelics, like LSD, mushrooms, stuff like that. And I was always the kid, that I could go and I was a bold, brash kid, so I would get this stuff. So, everybody wants to party, they pull their money together, and I was the one that would actually go score, so I figured out really quick, within the first couple of years doing this, by the time I was 15, that I was like, like I can get high for free, and after I figured this out, then it was like another realization. Probably by the time I was like 16, I was like, I can get high for free and I can make money.
Wow.
And then
it gave you acceptance in that crew.
Well, yeah, because
the acceptance you didn't have moving around the whole time.
The next evolution in this was like, I figured out like, okay, if I'm the guy that's bringing the weed and psychedelics, I'm like, then I'm like a rock star. Like everybody knows my name. Everybody's waiting for me to go to the party. So I'm saying this was like a 3-year thing, that it took me to, this transition, from 13, 14, 15, 16, where I had these kind of realizations. And then by the time I was 16, I was like, this is, everybody knows who I am now. This is what I wanted. This is what I craved. All the girls know who I am.
That was the George Young. That's what attracted George Young to it. Yeah.
It's a popularity,
Right.
it really.
And you got some money now too.
I never thought I don't know why I've never put that together. Like you always wonder why people get into dealing or doing something on the drug side. It makes perfect sense now. It really does make sense.
Yeah.
But that's why I love doing this show, because I get to see that different perspective on things.
Yeah. So by the time I'm 16, I'm basically, I'm like a rock star, but I'm not a rock star, but I'm a rock star because, I go like even the older people, like 18, 19, 20, the people that graduated, the people in college, they're still waiting for me. I'm the one.
You're getting invited to all the college parties and stuff.
I mean, I'm the one, and whatever it is about me, because I was always bold, brash, like, and I was big too, like
I was going to say,
like
you're a big guy
13
now. Were you bigger then, too?
Like 13, I was 6'1" by the time I was 13, and I was already shaving at 13. I mean, obviously, I was a young man, so I was a lot skinnier. I mean, as you get older, you gain weight, you get bigger. Plus, I did 21 years in prison, so I did a lot of weightlifting and working out and shit like that. But, yeah, but I just always, like I was the type of kid, like when I was 14, I was dating like 16, 17-year-olds, and it was all, it was because I was a bigger dude, but it was all because of how I carried myself and the access I got. Because, like, I'm telling you, I was 17. I would go down. I'm in Northern Virginia at this point. By the time I was 17, my dad actually retired, and he was working in the Pentagon for a defense contractor. So I would fly down when I was 17 to Texas, Dallas, Texas, and through like mutual friends down there that went to college down there, I hooked up with like a Mexican national who had like a trucking company, and he was bringing in like brick pot, right? And he would get it up to Dallas, and I would go down there and like. I went down there and I maybe had enough money to buy like, 10 pounds or 20 pounds, which we're talking like $400 each. So you're talking about maybe $4 to $8 grand.
Yeah, but it's pure though, right? You can cut it up.
No, I mean, I mean, I don't know. You don't really cut weed up, I mean, weed is weed, it's brick pot. It's like, it's not that weed back then compared to the weed we have now was garbage. The brick pot was garbage. But it was the only thing that was coming in at that time, except in the fall when they would have the harvest, like in the Emerald Triangle or Kentucky, you would get good weed for about 3 months. But I was going down there, and whatever it was about me, like my confidence or whatever, like I convinced this dude, to basically give me like, front me like 50 or 100 pounds. I packed it in a suitcase, flew back up, checked it, and went right to DC National and picked it up right off the turnstile.
Wow.
That's
to try to do that today.
I don't think you could do it today. I don't. I mean, because back then you
Those
could
damn
just
dogs in the airport will pick it right up.
I mean, you could just go to the airport back then and you could pay cash for a ticket. I would pay cash for a one-way ticket, and I would tell them my name was John Smith. This is like pre-Patriot Act.
Right.
So they didn't have all the licenses. I mean, they wasn't really big on money. I mean, you could really, because they only had like the metal detectors. So
That's some brass balls,
yeah,
though.
Yeah, but that's kind of how, I just developed, all these, access to like drug dealers. I think, like when you come, it's like anything in life. When you're confident and you tell them like, because that's why, like in the drug trade, like they'll be like, oh, because big distributors, they're looking for people who can move their shit.
Right.
So, they're like, oh, can you take 50? Can you do that? And a lot of people are like, oh, no, I can't do that. Or they don't want to have the responsibility. I was the type of dude, I would just jump on it. I'd be like, yeah, give me whatever. I'll move it.
I was going to say, from moving around from area to area, how do you keep up that trade? I mean, you gotta get yourself involved with like these bigger drug dealers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I moved around a lot as a kid. So, my dad retired from the military probably, about 86, when I was probably like 16, and we settled in Northern Virginia. And that's kind of where, my whole thing started. But, also from growing up in California, I had contacts in California, friends, that childhood friends or whatever. And I would go back to California too a lot of times in the summer, and visit and stuff. So kind of like they got involved in kind of like the Dead counterculture, Grateful Dead counterculture scene. I kind of got involved in the Grateful Dead counterculture scene. So then, once we get like 16, 17, and 18, and we're kind of like comparing notes. So I got to the point, like, for the LSD, I could get them to ship LSD like through the mail, to me in Northern Virginia, and I would supply all the colleges. I could get them to ship, and like we're talking, this is like 88, 89. Right. I could get them like in the Emerald Triangle where they grew like what we call kind bud back then, as opposed to the Mexican brick pot. I would get them to like mail me, because back then, the farmers, they were only trying to get maybe like 20, 30 pounds a year, because they grow in the mountains up there. So they, grow on the side of the mountains and everything. There were so many helicopters and stuff from the war on drugs. They really concentrated on that area. So a lot of these farmers, they were just trying to get like 20, 30 pounds a year. And that's how, they made their money. But they were selling like each of those pounds for probably, like $3-4 grand. And then like down the line, people are paying like whatever, $100 a quarter, which is like $6,400 a pound. So that's how you can make money on it.
I'm listening to you talk about this stuff, and you've developed this whole business plan in your head at a very young age. Do you realize, yes, you took the path of least resistance, right? Would you agree with that? That to get to your goal of that acceptance. This seemed to be the fastest conduit.
You know what? I found out I was always good at everything. Like I was good at sports. You know what I'm saying? I was good academically. You know, I was good with girls. I was pretty much good at everything I did, but I wasn't great at anything. And you know, like when you're in high school and you're growing up and there's people that are just like great at something.
You got the jocks and you got,
Yeah, and in comparison, you know, I was very versatile. So when I became the drug dealer, when I became the bad boy, that was like something
that you were the best at.
I could become the best at. And it was easy to do it.
Because I have a feeling, knowing you for a very short time and talking to you on the phone, that I have a feeling no matter what you did in life, you were going to be successful. Like there's certain people that are set out in this life to be successful as long as they make the right moves. You chose drugs and you were ultra successful, but I'm pretty sure if you would have chose your current profession of writing and filmmaking, that you still would have been been great at. Maybe take a little bit longer. And I see that in so many different people who go away to prison. And it takes them that moment of clarity, that time where they can just sit back, relax, collect their thoughts, and reorganize to get to there. But you were how much money do you think you were making a week on your best?
I had a 9-month run, probably like from 90 into 91 before I caught my Fed case, where I was probably making like 25, 30 grand a month profit.
Holy cow. And
as a 19, 20
I was going to say late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, as a 19, 20-year-old. So 9 months, you know, everything was a buildup. You know, I had that age, you know, like 13, 16, where I had all the realizations and I was kind of dabbling. And then I had like that age, like 16 to 19, where I was kind of getting the contacts. You know, I was getting the connections. All my friends were at different colleges. You know, I ended up by basically like 89, 90. I was supplying 15 colleges in 5 states on the East Coast with LSD and weed. And this is what I used to do. I just used to drive around, man. I had like a circle. You know, I would go down like 81 of Virginia. I would stop like, you know, VMU, you know, Virginia, you know, University of Virginia, Radford, you know, Virginia Tech, you know, Virginia Commonwealth, and then I would come up to Kentucky, like Eastern Kentucky, University of Kentucky. I would go into West Virginia University, which in Morgantown, which was like a huge fucking party school, you know, and then I would go into Pennsylvania and I would hit Penn State at State College, but then I would hit all the satellite campuses because Penn State has like 7 satellite campuses. Okay. So I would hit all those. Then I would come back down into Maryland, like University of Maryland, and then I would even go into DC and hit some of the DC schools, you know, and then like the Northern Virginia schools like George Mason. So I just used to like basically like drive around in these states and I would drop off weed. And a lot of times it was front because it was all people I went to high school with. I went to a real big high school in Northern Virginia called Robinson.
I was going to say, you got to have like a contact at all these different places. You can't just pull up in your car and say, okay, weed for sale.
I'm Seth the weed guy. It doesn't work that way. But you had developed this business and you're probably living like a king. At 19 years old, 30 grand a month, you're living like a king. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. In 1990, so, you know, I mean, different, you know, 1990, I think 30 grand was
Did you
worth
buy yourself a
more.
nice car? Or was it, did you be like a nonchalant car?
I had, I used to get like those, they had those Subaru, I used to get the Subaru turbo station wagons that said the 4-wheel drive on the side. So I had 3 of those. Those were like my smuggler, because I'm a drug smuggler. That's what I was. You know, I was a drug smuggler.
You graduated from pot dealer to drug smuggler.
Yeah, so, you know, because I would go, like I say, I would go to Kentucky and I would get weed. I would go to Texas and get weed. I would go down to Florida, like Fort Myers, and get weed. I would get stuff. I wouldn't drive from the West Coast, but I would get stuff, the LSD and the mushrooms and the Humboldt County bud. I would get it sent, you know, from the West Coast, you know, in smaller amounts, you know. But like I would say, I would drive down to Texas. I would pick up like 100 pounds, you know, 150 pounds. I would go down to Fort Myers. Fort Myers, like a lot of people don't know Fort Myers. Fort Myers was a big drug port in Florida. I used to get a lot of weed out of there.
So how eventually you're riding high, you're doing this great business. There had to come a time where the government's looking at you because you're moving a lot. There's eyes on you. So when's the first time that you got the inkling that something was maybe amiss?
Yeah, I used to do these things where I would actually I would just like disappear for like 2 or 3 months, you know, because see, my name too, like I knew in Northern Virginia, not everybody knew my last name, but everybody knew Seth, right? Because that, you know, I mean, I know they got like Seth Rogen and all these people now with Seth, but back then in the late 80s, I mean, there was hardly anybody named Seth. This has been like more like in the 90s and 2000s. This name has been more commonplace. So I knew people knew my name. So I would, kind of go take 2 months. Like when my case was developing, I was actually in Hawaii for 2 months, because I felt like it was a little hot because they had a bust at UVA. It was like one of those busts like where the DEA, where they went in on like a high profile college fraternity at UVA, and they didn't really get anything. They got like, some bongs, some scales, a few hits of acid or whatever, but that acid was from me. So people started mentioning my name. So
I was gonna say, these college kids are gonna start chirping. Oh, where'd you get this from, Seth?
yeah, so but a lot of these people were so far removed because I insulated myself. Like the bigger I got, I insulated myself. I always did, like I would basically deal with like 5 people, and through them, I would even tell them sometimes because I knew the people who did the stuff. Maybe I even went to school with them, but like I say, we might all 3 know each other. We all deal drugs. I'm the source, but I don't want to fuck with you because I don't like the way you move. So everything goes through you. You know what I'm saying?
So one point of contact, that way you lessen the chance of that spider web.
Yeah.
That's the way we develop CIs, confidential informants, in our job. You deal with some of people are trying to get out of jail, so they're not always totally
stay
up
out
front.
of jail too.
They're not always totally up front, but you deal with one CI because when you have that net of CIs and they all know about each other, they're going to start working against you.
Yeah, I would try to compartmentalize too. Basically, that's what I would do. I would compartmentalize. I didn't want this person to know what this person was doing. I didn't want this person to know how much this person was moving. And then my biggest thing, because look, I didn't carry a gun or anything. Like I was not like a criminal organization. I was basically like a freelance
One-man show.
Yeah, entrepreneur, and I used to drive around, and I always had drugs, money, in my car, and I had different stash houses at different places. But and back then, we didn't have cell phones back then, but we had like the 1-800 beeper. That was like, I had the 1-800 beeper, so I was like big time. They'd have those big brick phones, but they were like so expensive. I didn't have one of those. I think they were going for like $2,000 back then.
Plus
they were
$9 for a phone call.
They were just so big. So I just had the 1-800 beeper, but that was my biggest deterrent against like getting robbed or, against, someone like, pulling up on me or even like somebody narking me out and finding me out. I was the type of dude, like I might be 30 minutes from Morgantown, but the dudes are beeping me like, hey, we got your money. When are you going to come through? And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be there in 2 days. And I know I'm going to be there. I'm like half hour away.
So they don't have time to set up. That's good.
Yeah. So that was like, I used a lot of misdirection, and then sometimes like dudes would be hitting me and I would just show up. Like I wouldn't even let them know when I'm coming. I would just show up, because I had like all these different colleges. I had like dudes I went to high school with. So they got all these different party houses and I had like keys to all the houses because most of them I paid rent and I paid their phone bills because when I would get to these places, I would talk on their phones like crazy long distance because that's how I did all my business. It was never like in a phone, my
Like
phone.
I said, we had no cell phones or
So I would go.
Booth.
Yeah, I would might have a girl at a college, or I'd be at my friend's party house, and I would be running their phone bill up like $200-300 a month.
As long as you're paying it.
They didn't care, but so it wasn't my name because I used to use payphones a lot too. So I would try to.
Yeah.
Nobody knows now.
What are they? My
Yeah.
son saw one. My 12-year-old saw one the other day. He goes, "Dad, what's that?" And I said, "Well, that's how we used to get our drugs."
Yeah.
No,
I used to have like I used to write it down. So there'd be banks of payphones, at these different colleges, and where I had different stash houses, and I would have the numbers written down, and I would have a number like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So basically, I could call somebody that was somewhere else. And I could be like, oh, hit me on. I wouldn't even have to say the number because I would write it out for them, the dudes I was working with, and I would give them these lists. And I'd be like, well, hit me a number 1 in West Virginia. And they know, they dial the number. Then I talk to them because sometimes you got to go wait. They got to wait till they go to a payphone. And then you always got to have a lot of quarters too.
That's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
That's a lot of moving parts. Did ever get the paranoia ever set in? You sound like you're insulating yourself pretty good.
Not when I was doing it. No, I mean, because I just like the whole war on drugs thing, right? Because look, so the war on drugs really started popping off, like around 87, 88. I guess that's when they changed the laws. And
Nancy Reagan, right? Just say no.
yeah, but what they were, it was like the I don't know, called the omnibus crime, but I think Joe Biden was like, the architect of it. But it was at first, because in the 80s, it was the crack era, and all the narco terrorism. So, looking back now, our country, rightly so or not rightly so, I think, and even like in New York, like cops were getting shot by crack dealers. They had the Edward Byrne case.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Where they just
Byrne.
went up and executed this rookie cop. He was just like, watching a witness's house. So, I mean, there was a lot of fear in government because they saw what was happening over here with the crack. And they were like, they didn't want it to be like Pablo Escobar, like Colombia, the narco terrorism, because that stuff was huge in the 80s, and look, Pablo Escobar almost took over Colombia. I mean, Pablo Escobar bombed a plane out of the fucking sky to kill a political guy.
But what they never realize is pot and LSD are far different than crack.
Oh yeah, no, but
Without doubt.
so they made these laws though because of the crack and because they didn't want this narco terrorism, which was funded by money to take over, and they saw all these guys in the hood. So they made these laws, reactive, rightly so or not rightly so. I mean, it depends on who tells the story, but they were just basically going after all the black guys in the hood for the first 3 or 4 years when they made these laws, and that's who the people were being targeted. Some because they deserved it, and some because they were just there.
They weren't looking at Seth, the white dude.
Yeah, but then
Well, you don't fit the profile. I'm sorry, you just don't.
yeah. So I never thought, and like I say, I lived outside DC, so I saw all this stuff going on, but I just never thought because I knew dudes older than me that were like big weed dealers, and they had started businesses and all types of stuff, and that was kind of like my plan. I wanted to become a cash millionaire by the time I was 25. That was my plan, and I was going to have all these different businesses, and funnel all my drug money into them and fund them. So I never had the inclination that I could even get caught. First off, I thought I was too smart to get caught, but second off, I didn't think I would ever be targeted. But after the inner cities getting hit so hard with these drug war laws, for like 3 or 4 years, then people started claiming racism. And I mean, we can look back now and we can say, yeah, a lot of these laws were racist, in a lot of ways. But that's when like the DEA and the feds said like, okay, well, we're going to bust white drug dealers too, to make it seem like we're not racist. So that's what they did. I was in that first wave. My case was 91. So that was the first wave when they went out to the suburbs, and they started getting the weed dealers and LSD. Because, I mean, basically, they got big coke dealers out in the suburbs too. But I think anybody, like if you're dealing with like coke, heroin, meth, those guys are getting popped because there's a lot of violence associated with the trade. There's a lot of money. But the marijuana and psychedelics, that trade, like I came up under the Grateful Dead, right? So the Grateful Dead, there's a bunch of people that follow the Grateful Dead around.
Oh,
they call
yeah.
them deadheads, right?
Deadheads.
Yeah.
And so
Follow them around the country.
yeah, and a lot of them, like that's what they deal. They deal marijuana, and they deal LSD, they deal mushrooms, right? But they call them families, right? And I always thought it was weird because they call them families. They don't call them criminal organizations. So I think there's like a big difference. Like somebody that's involved in like marijuana, LSD, it's even though could say, okay, yeah, you could brand it as a criminal organization, but it's not the same. It's not the mafia. It's not like these, these crack drug lords, these Colombians, because if you snitch in a Grateful Dead family, you just get ostracized. You don't get killed.
Right.
You don't get to go to the next show.
Yeah, you just, no, everybody starts fucking with you.
Right.
But no, nobody's getting killed. It's not like, the bikers or the mafia or, these other drug lords, like the Mexican cartels now, you snitch.
You're dead.
Yeah.
Your family's
gone.
dead.
Yeah.
Your cousins are dead. But there had to be that so I guess a come to Jesus moment where they were on you. And what was that feeling like?
Yeah, so I knew, I was in Hawaii, and like there was like some little bus like on the state level, and like shit was getting fucked up, and like some of my guys, like dudes I went to high school with, that were supposed to be working together, it seemed like dudes were snitching on each other, and I'm just chilling out. I'm basically waiting for the fall because I would make my money in the fall when they harvested the weed. I made the most money like on like what we call the kind, but like the good weed that they would grow in this country. So I come back, I cut my Hawaii trip short, and I come back, and really, like in retrospect, it was one of the stupidest things I ever did. So I come back, and I'm like walking basically right into a hornet's nest. They got like and it kind of went from that UVA case that University of Virginia case, and they kept investigating. It kept spiraling, and they kept getting more people because a lot of people knew who I was, And then it was also the summertime, so everybody was back from college in Fairfax County. That's where Robinson High School. That's where my parents lived, and that's where like I had a couple different houses, and where I was basically ran my operations from. So everybody was back, and it was like the summer of 91 too. And it was like, back then, like nobody would think about that now, but back then, like sometimes in the summer, especially like 88, 89, 90, 91, like it would be so dry for weed. Like you couldn't even get any weed, because, the harvest would only be for like maybe 3 months in the fall. And then the Mexican brick pot was coming, but like they were doing a lot of stuff on the border. So that stuff wasn't always coming in. So, I even remember like on the East Coast, like the law enforcement would put up like, they would put up billboards, like, referring to weed, like you think it's dry now, wait till this summer. They would be like billboards up like that, but, yeah, so I kind of come back into this hornet's nest, and there's no weed, and like shit's kind of fucking up, like a couple little different busts, and all I'm thinking is I need to get my money up for the fall because that's when I'm gonna make a killing, because I was basically making like $1,000 a pound off that good weed, but you had to come with the money because they just do these little grows like 20, 30 pounds. So, you got to come with like 20 or 30 grand and just buy the farmers out, and I would go see like every fall, I would go see like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 farmers, So I'm coming back, cut my trip short from Hawaii. I come back and I have no idea. I'm like basically walking into the hornet's nest. There's already an investigation started. They don't know my full name, but they kind of got an idea who I am. And because, everybody's saying everything's from me. And then I did another real stupid mistake because it was so dry. There was no weed. So I couldn't get any weed to sell. So I just like flooded. I flooded the whole Northern Virginia with like acid, like just like so. And this is how much I flooded. So when I first started bringing LSD into Northern Virginia and into the East Coast, like, 87, 88, it would probably be like $15 a hit, maybe up $20 a hit. By this time, like 91, it's like $2-3 a hit.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? And
Over flooded it?
yeah, it saturated it. And all my people from college, they're all in the same place. And everybody, because we're all trying to gear up for the fall because we know that's when we can make the money with the good weed when they harvest. So everybody's trying to get their money up. And so everybody's trying to sell acid. So it was just saturated. And then they had this other thing that happened. Actually, in Fairfax County, there's this area called Clifton. It's like all these like back then it was all these $1 million homes, like, big, I don't know, maybe like 5 acres. But, like all kids in the suburbs, when the parents are gone, we throw parties. So they had this big field party in Clifton, and like we would bring in stages, we would bring in like skate ramps, and there might be like 500, 600 people there, and it'd be out on this 5 acres, in this field behind the house. And, inevitably, later at night, the cops would get called. So the cops would come in and it was just, everybody was tripping on acid, right? So there was this one 15-year-old kid, he was like running naked through the woods, like tripping on acid, having a bad trip or I don't know, whatever. And, a cop was chasing him. The cop grabbed him, tackled him. And this kid somehow managed to take the cop's gun out and he shot him in the arm.
oh no.
So once that happened,
Now
then,
all eyes are on you.
then it was like, and like I say, this from my point of view, I can see law enforcement's point of view too. But from my point of view, it was basically like a LSD witch hunt. Like they were just going hard. So they brought the DEA in. And like I say, some other people had been investigating all this different stuff on the state level and the federal level. And then, at this point, once one of their own got shot, and like I say, I mean, dude didn't get killed or nothing, but it was a flesh wound, but I'm sure, I've never got shot in the arm, but I'm sure it's not very pleasant.
Sure, it's got to hurt.
So, I'm not discounting it or downplaying it, but, yeah, so they started this investigation, and actually the dude who sold that kid, because that kid, he told him where he got the LSD from. So the dude that sold it to him was actually a dude. At one time, he was like one of my real good friends, but this is way back, probably like 4 years ago when we were like freshmen, our sophomores. So he was very far removed from me, but they got him, and then he kind of took him up the chain, and the chain eventually led to me. And, then, like I say, it was crazy. So from when that happened, like maybe in June, like when I was in Hawaii, and then I got back, I kind of walk into this. And then like July, August, 91, it's like crazy. Like everybody I talk to, it's like, oh, the DEA is coming, the state narcotics people are coming, and they're asking about you. So I'm like hearing this for like 2 months. At the same time, I'm trying to, sell as much acid. I got all this acid in the area, and I'm just trying to like get rid of it. I'm trying to dump it because my whole goal is still like by September, I want to get as much cash as possible so I can buy this weed and make money. And, yeah, it was just, it was a bad situation on my part. And like I say, I had no idea of the federal laws or that they were coming out, to the suburbs, or that they were actively looking for cases, out there. And in retrospect, it was really stupid of me. If I would have had some type of intuition or some type of foresight, I could have maybe just disappeared or whatever. But I just kept doing my thing, and, they eventually found me, and I got indicted federally.
How much did they catch you with?
I got caught with nothing.
You got caught with nothing. It was just what you sold.
But it was just the case that was built up.
They caught somebody else with like 120 sheets, which is basically like 12,000 hits of acid.
Wow. And
so and granted, I mean, it was mine.
But you didn't have it.
At one point, it was yours.
Possession is 9/10 of the law, and it didn't seem like you had possession of it.
I never got caught with, I got 25 years in prison. I never got caught with any drugs.
Well, stop.
Never got caught with any money.
Stop for a second.
Yeah.
So you got caught with no drugs. You got caught with no drugs. They gave you 25 years. Did you piss somebody off?
Well, yeah, no, I did, because I took off. I was a fugitive for 2 years. So
No kidding.
yeah, I took off. I was U.S. Marshals top 15 most wanted list.
Well, what'd that feel like inside when you were on the run, that anxiety?
I'd say the first 6 months, man, I was kind of paranoid because, like when the feds come in and kind of crash your world like that, and they get to everybody, and you just think like they're like this universal eye in the sky, and
Big Brother's watching.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's not like that. I mean, yeah. At some level, I mean, there's probably people that can do that, but it's not like the DEA doesn't have that type of capability, or the local narcotics officers don't have that type of capability. But yeah. So when I went on the run, like the first 6 months, I was like super paranoid, man, because I thought like they could track me. Now, I mean, they could track you with the phone, but back then I had different ID and everything. I was just like super paranoid because they kind of collapsed my whole world.
What was this?
That's what I was going to say. When you were on a run, you couldn't go back to your old friends.
No, I cut off time with basically everyone.
You couldn't go to your crash houses. Would you just go from hotel to hotel, or?
No, I just went out. I went out to California, and I actually got a place right in Hollywood. And I hung out there for 6 months.
So you fit right in.
Hang out with all the other drug dealers.
No, but your parents, being a military kid, your father's a Marine. That's got to be tough. Like, what was their reaction when you get caught? Now, when you went on the run, before you answer that, did you already know what time you're looking at?
Yeah, I was looking at 20 to life, yeah.
20 to life. What did your parents say to that?
I mean, they didn't agree with it. I mean, I mean, because through this whole thing, like from the age of 13, I'd kind of, destroyed the relationship with my parents, because I was kind of like, the proverbial, like, rebel without a cause, except I had a cause, and it was like LSD and marijuana. But, I'd really destroyed the relationship with them. There was a lot of friction. They really weren't happy. They didn't exactly know at the level I was doing stuff, but they knew I was doing stuff. And, even though they wanted to deny it, it was still kind of there. You know what I'm saying?
It's gotta be tough for them to take.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, they obviously weren't happy, but, when they did find out, like the time I was facing, I mean, they thought it was wrong. They were like, I was a first-time nonviolent offender. So they were like, how can you be looking at 20 to life?
But did they know how in-depth you are into it?
I mean, yeah, once I caught the case and the newspaper articles and stuff came out, yeah, they knew.
Holy shit.
I mean, the
You mean my
Washington,
son?
yeah, the Washington Post was calling me the Fairfax County LSD kingpin or the Northern Virginia LSD kingpin.
You got that fame and notoriety you were looking for, except
Yeah.
the wrong kind.
I mean, on the outlaw status, yeah, my outlaw resume was pretty big back then.
So you go away, and you do. How many years did you do total?
21.
You did 21 years.
85%, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That first day, and I've heard this, I've never been to prison, but I've heard this, that you're going to get as reformed as you're going to get once that door closes the first night. Is there any validity to that?
I don't know. I think for me, it was more, I had a lot of time. So, I was very angry at first. So, I did get involved right with college classes. Like right when I came in, they used to, you could take them through the Pell Grant. They actually had the instructors come in, right from, I was in Manchester, Kentucky, a medium high security prison. And it was weird because they had the teachers coming in from Eastern Kentucky to teach in the prison at night. And I used to sell drugs at Eastern Kentucky. So that was like kind of weird.
Probably.
Did you ever sell
some of
to instructors?
Yeah.
No.
Hey, remember me?
But that's interesting. So you get all this time, and at what point during your time do you decide to use it? And I know this from my stint in rehab. So my stint in rehab, I went in there with 3 notebooks, 2 books, because I'm going to use my time. I'm not going to sit there and waste it. You can sit there and you can rest. You can do this. You can do that. You can screw around. But you chose to use your time. How did that decision come about?
I think it was a gradual process, like over the first 10 years. But I mean, I jumped right into the college classes. I mean, basically because like prison is real boring, so
Do anything.
Something
right?
to do.
So, and I'd always been a big education dude before I got into drugs. And both my parents are like, like my whole family, even my little brother and little sister, like everybody has master's degrees. I finally got my master's degree in prison. So I was the last one to get it, but, it took me a while to get it. But, yeah, so I dived right into the education, but it kind of took me like 10 years. I was just kind of doing that, just kind of break the monotony, and kind of repair the relationships with my parents because they were big believers in education. So when I started getting like 4.0s and stuff like that, that's how I kind of repaired the relationship with my family during my first couple years. But yeah, it took me like 10 years, but like 10 years in, maybe like 6 years in, I kind of decided I wanted to be a writer, and that's how like everything kind of progressed from then.
It's just another form of creation. So this is actually, it sounds crazy that you go to prison as a successful drug dealer and you end up in prison as a successful writer. Because like I said before, I have the feeling about you that you would have been successful no matter what you do. You just have to put your full energy and your full thought. I'm watching the way you're just reeling off statistics and math in your head on these drugs. This is this, this is this, this is, and I did this and this and this. How did you figure out the writing game? Because the writing game is brutal.
Meanwhile, Kevin hasn't been successful on one venture in his life yet. But
Yeah, I just,
I'm very successful at breaking your chops.
I took the courses, so I started out in the classes, but then they did away with the Pell Grants. So then luckily by that time I'd taken the Pell Grants for 2 years. So I had like really good grades. And so my parents, said, if you want to continue college, we'll pay for correspondence courses. So I actually, I got in a correspondence program through Penn State. That's weird too, because I used to sell drugs there. So,
he goes
It's like visiting the campus. That's all
he
it
goes
is.
from Penn State to State Penn.
So I got my AA degree through correspondence. And when you do correspondence, it's all through the mail. You can basically do like a business kind of administration route, or you can do like a liberal arts. And, if you do like a liberal arts or humanities, I mean, it's basically like a lot of writing. So writing heavy, like history, writing papers. So I started kind of teaching myself to write. So I got my AA degree, then I got my BA degree through University of Iowa. And then I finally, somewhere, about, 15 years down the line, I got my master's degree, from California State University. And that was more film heavy. But, I just always saw as a writer, it's like a progression. It's like I started writing articles, just like little pieces. And I started getting them published from the inside. I actually started writing for Vice. I started doing a column for Vice, like when I was in prison, and then I got out. this is like early 2000s, and I got out, and Vice is like this big media conglomerate. Like I had no idea, and I was like a Vice OG. I'd been writing for them since they were like this little tiny company. So
And you also wrote for one of my favorite publications,
which one?
Penthouse.
Oh yeah, I did a lot of stuff.
You're gonna say Playgirl.
No, I did a lot of stuff for Penthouse. So I wrote for like a ton of overseas. So I started out articles. Then like 2005, I started doing the books, all gangster books, you know.
And there's a ton of them out there.
Yeah,
I mean,
I got like 25 books out.
That's great. Well, you know what? Like I said, you have all the time in the world to sit down there and reevaluate your life and really pursue in that fashion something that you obviously got a talent for.
I mean, I wrote the majority of those books in prison too. So, you know, I've done a couple since I've been out, but even the ones that I put since I've been out, I wrote a lot of the stuff, you know, so all like African-American drug lords, like prison gangs, like mafioso, because I was locked up with all these dudes. So, you know, I kind of got the idea, you know, I was like, I would just go up to like dudes that I was on the compound with, and I would be like, man, let me write your story. You know, some said no, some said yes. So that's kind of how it went. And, but my whole trajectory, the whole way with the writing thing, like I saw filmmaking was like the ultimate goal. Because to me, as a writer, I mean, that's what you do. You do articles, you do books, then you do film. You know, like if you're going to advance, you
It's
know,
like the
if you're trying-
progression.
yeah, that's a progression.
I'm wondering where you're going from here, but don't go anywhere just yet because you got some big things out. I know you just had White Boy on Netflix where you wrote it. You produced. What were your credits on there? I know you wrote it.
Yeah, no, I wrote it and produced it. So actually Sean Reck from Transition Studios, he's the director and it's his studio. But, you know, I brought the idea to him. It was based like on, because I'd been corresponding with Rick since around 2005 till I got in 2015.
We're talking about Rick Wersch, White Boy Rick himself.
Yeah, and we were corresponding. He was in one prison, and I was another. And I was writing about his case while I was in there, you know, because when he told me about his case, because, I mean, this dude was like started out, like he was brought into the game, you know, as an informant when he was 14. And I was like, how do you got like a life sentence, like when you're an informant? So that was just like, you know, it was like crazy. And, you know, it was like, and even in prison, like you always, you know, everybody in prison, like you distance yourself from informant. But this dude, like the legend about this dude, he had like this mythology from Detroit. It's like, you know, it was kind of like a character, like somebody like 50 Cent, like half the people loved him, half the people hated him. You know, he had that kind of, you know, I guess admiration or envy or hate that he generated. So he had like this crazy story. And I thought it was crazy too, because it was like, how can a 16-year-old white kid like run the drug trade in the crack era in Detroit? So it was like phenomenal, this whole story.
Anomaly.
So, you know, and then I found out like all the details and everything. And yeah, so when I got out, that was like one of the stories I wanted to do, because we talked about doing a book and stuff, but I was getting out. You know, I wanted to help him get out too, because I was like, dude, like, you know, this dude ended up doing like 32 years in prison for, you know, not a first time offense, but a nonviolent offense.
Maybe you saw a little bit of yourself in him.
Yeah, we did. We had a lot of similarities, you know, and plus he had got a life sentence when he was 17. And in 2012, the Supreme Court said you can't give a juvenile a life sentence. That was illegal, and they still had him in. So, you know, his case was very political, but I was very blessed to meet Sean Reck, and Sean Reck kind of mentored me, because I hadn't only been out of prison maybe like 18 months at this time. You know, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I had done some little shorts and stuff like that, you know, but nothing serious or nothing big time. And, you know, once he had found out I had access to the story and he could base the whole documentary off my work, you know, he like basically, you know, made me offer, and, you know, he mentored me, you know, in how to make documentaries. And like for that, you know, I'm like, you know, eternally grateful to him, because I learned from him. I got to be a part of this amazing documentary that ended up on Netflix and ended up top 10 on Netflix. And
They just took it off too. They took it
April
off.
1st. Yeah. We didn't renew with them. So it's supposed to go on Tubi though. You know, when you switch like platforms, sometimes you got to wait like 2-3 months.
Yeah.
Contractually. So it should be on Tubi, you know, sooner than later. So it's going to go on Tubi. We've never done the AVOD before. Like that's advertising video on demand. So it's supposed to go on that shortly. But, you know, I hope to get Rick out. And like I said, the documentary, we can't say that was everything. There was a lot of people, you know, a lot of advocacy, you know, on Rick's behalf, but we helped to get him out. And I got to make this amazing film. And more importantly, I got to learn how to make a film. From Sean Reck was an Emmy-winning. He's an Emmy-winning, Emmy-winning writer, director, producer. He cut his teeth. He did like 200 Crime Stopper shows for all the networks, and he won 9 Emmys, not like regional Emmys in Ohio. Not discounting them by any means, but not like a national.
An Emmy's an Emmy. You could always say I'm an Emmy Award winner.
But yeah, so he basically mentored me and trained me, and
you're
while
still
we were
going,
doing
though.
this.
But you're still going. It's not like you're one and done. You wrote 25 books. You did White Boy, and you're still going. Now you got this new one coming out, Nightlife, which I got to tell you, I watched it. Brother, it's fantastic. Like,
Thank you.
fantastic. I was hoping to watch it in snippets because it's, 2 hours?
No, it's about 75 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I was hoping to watch it in snippets. I ended up sitting through the whole thing. And I got the attention span of a gnat. He's
it's just one of those things you can't.
Oh, it's awesome.
You don't. You don't want to leave yourself at a cliffhanger. When you start watching it, you just got to keep watching it to the end.
So I love the fact that you chose to focus. You're actually going somewhere else. You're going somebody who's trying to change the circumstances around them.
Yeah.
So it's about this. The preacher's name, and it's his name.
Reverend Kenneth McCoy.
Reverend Kenneth McCoy, and he's taken back the streets of St. Louis. It's amazing. And where's that coming out on? Let's start there. Where and when? Yeah,
so that's the north side of St. Louis. The north side of St. Louis has like perennially been in the top 5 like for murder capital of the world.
But then they got that line.
Yeah, it's called the Delmar Divide. It's crazy, man, because it's like the north of this Delmar Divide is predominantly like black and poor, and south is rich and white, and you go from like $1 million houses to like crack houses, and it's basically like a block apart. And it's weird too because I mean it's not like there's not cops there, but all the cops are where the property is, where the property is valuable. Like the other side, like they don't care. I even know, like I interviewed like citizens, and they'll walk across a block to like where the Central West End is, and there are cop cars sitting there, and they'll be like, hey, there's like a open air drug market over there, and the cops will just be like,
yeah, we know.
Yeah. So I mean, but I think this story that I did, Nightlife, it's a microcosm of what's happening like all over our country, like with redlining, gentrification, all this different type of issues. And when I met this guy, the Reverend Kim McCoy, I actually did an article about him and his ministry called Nightlife for Vice first. It was called the People Who Walk St. Louis's Most Dangerous Streets. And I did this in 2015. And at the same time, I'm starting to make White Boy at this time. So I want to make my own film because I'm learning, but I don't have any funding, right? So I'm looking for something local, and I'm looking for something like I can get some college students, with cameras out. And, I kind of find this story. So we just go out with this guy. I'm like, hey, can we just come out with you and start following you with cameras? And he's like, yeah, cool. So we just start following him with cameras.
Insane, by the way. So I didn't share it. I won't share it. But your camera crew, or you out there, I don't know whether you were on set at the time. They're just walking around. Yeah, and you're pop, like automatic gunfire.
No, I'm in the film. You actually see me a couple times. I'm actually walking in the film. So I'm actually in the film, walking around with like a yellow vest on. So, it was crazy. So it's funny because one of my cameramen was actually an ex-military dude. Like, I don't know, he was like 8 years. Like he was in, I don't know, like Iraq, Kuwait or whatever, I guess in the 90s or 2000s. And then he got out and he used his GI Bill to go to film school. And then I met this guy. His name's Corey Mack. He's a producer and a cameraman on the film. And so, and he was just starting, filming like at that time. So it wasn't like he was that good. But the reason I brought him was because he had he was licensed to carry and he knew how to use it. Ex-military dude. So I knew like nobody else knew. 2 birds with one stone. Nobody else knew, but this dude, like every time we went out, this dude had like a 9. Thank God he never had to break it out. We never had to use it. But I mean, he was an experienced.
Yeah.
He was an experienced dude. So he'd been in a lot of situations and war situations. So but he had it. So I knew, and some like. The Reverend Kim McCoy and probably some of the other camera people, they didn't do that. But that was important for me you know, especially as ex-con, because I mean, I can't carry a gun, just to have somebody experienced, you know. So, yeah, we basically, so we followed him around for 2 years and we filmed. He goes out at night, like from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, like all the hot spots. And he's basically a violence interrupter. That's his main thing. But he brings out like fruits, you know, food, you know, blankets, socks, underwear. He has Narcan on him, you know, in case somebody's ODing. He tries to get the addicts into rehab. He tries to get the homeless people, you know, into shelters. So that's kind of his thing. And so we filmed it for 2 years. So I got all this footage, man. We got tons of footage because I'm bringing out like 3 camera people, and every time we're going out. And then I gotta start like this editing process, you know. And I'm doing a white boy, so I knew how to do it, but it was different because like I'm doing this basically with no budget. I don't have any money, you know. So people are doing a lot of stuff for free for me, or I'm getting a lot of younger people just graduated college, you know, they want to be involved in something. So, you know, it took me a long time. It took me like 5 years to make this documentary, you know, 2 years of shooting and then 3 years of editing. But, you know, finally, you know, it's ready. We're going to premiere July 15th at the St. Louis Filmmaker Showcase. For me, it's important to premiere this film in St. Louis because it's a St. Louis film. And what this guy is doing, he's basically the Reverend Kenneth McCoy. He's on a mission to save his community. So I wanted to have that impact on the community. But, you know, right after, you know, probably in August, we're gonna release it nationally, so it'll be available like on, you know, Amazon, iTunes, and then I'll be looking for a streaming deal. I can't say it's gonna end up on Netflix because, you know, I don't know what Netflix is gonna want to buy at that point when we're ready to put it up.
Well,
you know,
with
to
this
get licensed.
story, because there's very few people in this world that actually, everybody says I want to change the world, but there's very few people who are actually ready to take a hands-on approach to changing the world. We're about a month out from your premiere, and would you have a problem with us playing your trailer?
No, go ahead. Yeah, you can play it.
I seen all these bombed out buildings, all this violence. What are you doing? This is your neighborhood. These are your people.
St. Louis is often described as one of the most divided cities in the country.
The opioid crisis is the biggest public health emergency.
Are solved with a gun.
The number of homicides in St. Louis this year passed 200.
This is about making a human connection.
You have to be able to see that there is some hope down the road.
I wanted to go where nobody else will, where everybody's scared to go. Show that God hasn't forgotten.
When the pistol's getting popped, is you there? You telling me to quit?
You might as well. It ain't working.
Man, I can't do that, man.
Your camera's off now. This real shit.
What's the point in having faith if you're not going to take a risk, if you're not going to take a chance, if you're not going to put yourself in harm's way for the sake of a greater good? What's the point?
Well, you can tell it's Friday night. Y'all, let's have a word of prayer real quick. Lord, we praise you. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you.
I've seen this city, and I've seen the spirit of these people, and I've watched these folk fight for their neighborhoods, street by street, house by house.
I start to say I hate to be so preachy, but I am a preacher. But anyway, we're just so blessed. Say hi, Reverend Brown.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
I'd love for our audience to see this stuff because, like you did what you did, you changed your life around, and we're coming to the end of this thing. And I think it's important for people to know that just because your current circumstances are now doesn't mean that they could be your future circumstances. So at the end of every show, every guest that we bring in there, we walk them through this journey. You went through a really, really rough journey. Nonviolent offender, 21 years in prison that you did out of a 25-year, 25, 26, doesn't matter.
25 years.
25 years. So if you had to quantify all this suffering that you went through in your life, what do you think it's taught you?
I would just say, I always tell people, my biggest thing is I'm relentless. You know, like
that's what I took out of it. Just keep going. Yeah, he's like a keep going kind of guy. I mean,
I'm not
amazing.
the most talented. There's people that are way more talented than me at everything, but I think my best talent is I'm relentless. I don't give up. And like I say, I had to walk this journey. I mean, I look at it now, whatever. A lot of people are like, how do you do 21 years or whatever? But I mean, I did it. I had to do it. I didn't have any choice. So I did it, and I walked through, and I did the best I can at every moment, every day. I mean, do I look back now and say, "Oh, you could have did this way, you could have did this way, whatever," And even for my first 5 years, like I would look back like on my case, and I was like, "What could I have done different? Like if I did this at this point." But everybody can do that in life. At some time, you just got to think, whatever you did, you made the best decision, what you thought at the time, even if it was an awful decision. So you just got to leave the past in the past, and keep moving forward. So that's how I do everything. I don't allow any negativity in my life. I don't dwell on anything that happened.
You got a great attitude.
I just move forward, man. Because I even see it out here. And I this is a big thing that doing all that time taught me, right? Because I did so much time. I saw so many people come back, right? And I saw so many people like, they were like hung up on shit. They couldn't get over it. Like their girl left them. Their baby mama won't let them see their kids. Somebody snitched on them. They lost their house. They lost their money. Their best friend betrayed them. All this different stuff. And I saw these people, and they're just like, they're like fucked up. They keep dwelling on the same shit. And then they're like, they're on drugs. They're on like that chaos, that gang violence. They're on whatever to get their mind off of the issue that's eating them up. And I saw this in prison, like it's everywhere, like right in front of your face, because it's such a negative world, right? And I just decided, like, I'm not going to be that person, I'm not going to linger on, all the people, that turned informant on me. I'm not going to linger on this. And, but then when I get out in the world, I see at the same time, what I tell people all the time, right? I say, look, man, the only thing that's going to get in the way of your dreams is yourself.
That's a good point.
You got to start looking back. There's a quote that I hear all the time, and I just heard it today too. That's why the windshield is bigger than the rear of the mirror.
It's a good point, and I think we'll leave it there. Seth, thank you so much for coming all this way to join us. This has been an eye-opening experience. I've learned a lot. I want everybody to look out for your documentary, Nightlife. Of course, White Boy. Continue to watch that. It'll be out, I'm sure. That's a really good documentary, so I think it's going to be out everywhere. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. I want to remind everybody, go to BelladamaCigars.com, put in Suffering10. You get a nice 10% discount. Thanks again to Toyota of Hackensack. Visit ToyotaHackensack.com. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned today. Everyone wants to be important. Sometimes the best things come from the worst things. Anything is possible if you choose to use your time, but most importantly, be relentless. I like that very much. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of an Ex-Con Filmmaker with Seth Ferranti. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Also follow the Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode of the Suffering Podcast.
Let's talk about the suffering.